Hey everyone, today I want to give you a look at what it takes to filter the aquariums in my fish room. Over the years, a lot of things have changed with my aquariums, from the fish living in the tanks to the design, but one thing that has been consistent is my filtration. When it comes to choosing a filter for my aquariums, I keep three things in mind: reliability, functionality, and home friendliness. Obviously, I don't want a filter that's going to randomly fail on me. I prefer well-built filters that can last for years. The main purpose of an aquarium filter is to house beneficial bacteria, to remove free-floating waste from the water column, and to oxygenate the water. So I look for a filter that has a high gallon per hour flow rate and that has a lot of space for filter media. And lastly, I need my filters to be home friendly, in other words, quiet and as unnoticeable as possible. I've experimented with many different types of filters when I first started with fish keeping, but once I found filters that fit my criteria, I stuck with them. By the way, this video is not sponsored. It should be, but it's not. I'm not advertising any of these filters. I just like them. With that being said, I have two aquariums on the main level of my home: my 40-gallon reef tank and my 210-gallon community tank. This is where my family spends most of their time, so it's critical that the filtration on these aquariums are quiet. My 40-gallon reef tank has two Aquaclear 70 hang on the back filters. It only takes one of these filters to filter this aquarium. I added the second one to create more surface vegetation and to house more beneficial bacteria. These filters have a flow rate of 300 gallons per hour, and for this size filter, they have a decent amount of space for filter media. The water in the tank looks pretty pristine as well. I've had the one on the left for about 7 years. I replaced the impeller for about $20, and it functions just as good as the brand new one to the right. So I say that they are a reliable filter. As for the noise output, you can hear a slight rattle, but there's also a trickle sound that hides the rattle a bit, so it's not too terrible. For my 210-gallon aquarium, I'm using a Fluval FX6 canister filter. These filters are pricey, but their silence is unmatched. This filter has a flow rate of 925 gallons per hour and a decent amount of space for filter media, and I'd say it does a decent job at keeping my water crystal clear. I bought this filter when I bought the tank, so it's about 10 years old. I have had to replace the motor and a few other parts, but it still runs as strong as it did on day one. Now this tank has a pretty wide footprint, being 6 feet long and 2 feet wide, so I did add a circulation pump to provide extra surface vegetation for oxygen exchange. In the basement, we have a 125-gallon grow tank, and I have my second Fluval FX6. This one's about 6 years old. The filter currently has a small leak from the purge valve. I have the replacement part, but I'm trying to hold off until it gets warmer outside because working on these filters can be pretty messy. It's not a consistent leak, it only drips when I physically move the filter, so it should be good for a few more weeks. I love these filters and they do a great job, but I don't use them on all my aquariums because they cost a lot and they take up too much space, especially for someone who keeps multiple tanks close together. Under this tank, we have another 125-gallon aquarium, and this tank has an Aquaclear 110, which is rated at 500 gallons per hour. This filter is perfect for this tank because it fits in such an awkward spot. Just like the Aquaclear 70, this bigger version has a decent amount of space for filter media, and I find it to be very customizable. I've had this filter for over 10 years. I did replace the impeller, and it runs the same way it ran on day one. This filter is also pretty quiet as well. Across the room, I have another 125-gallon tank with an Aquaclear 110. This is my preferred setup for this filter, where it's installed on the side of the tank. That way the output could move more water across the length of the tank. The filter is designed to go in the back of the tank like you saw with my previous 125, but with this setup, water hits the opposite side of the glass and creates current in that section of the tank. If you do have the opportunity to put it along the width of the tank, you'll have a bit more surface vegetation throughout your tank, depending on the size of your tank. Between this tank and the neighboring tank, I have an air pump that sends air to a sponge filter in my 29-gallon tank and into my 20-gallon tank. Sponge filters are great because they hold a lot of beneficial bacteria. They're great at oxygenating the water, and they're generally inexpensive. The downside is that the air pumps usually have an annoying humming sound, and the sponges are very ugly. I usually try to hide them, and I only use them for these aquariums that are temporary. For what it's worth, they keep my fish alive, and surprisingly, they keep my water pretty clear. Finally, we have my 880 gallon plywood aquarium and my 350 gallon tank that share my DIY sump. I needed a sump that took up the least amount of space, so these 55 gallon drums were perfect. I have water draining from the two tanks that meet inside of a Sterlite plastic tower. There are 3 drawers. The top drawer is full of filter floss. The water flows down into the second drawer, which is full of more mechanical filtration in the form of pads and sponges. I usually clean the first drawer once a month and the second drawer once every 2 to 3 months. The final drawer is full of sponge filters, which I never clean because they're used to house beneficial bacteria. The water exits at the bottom of the tower into the 55 gallon drum, and I have a layer of about 3 inches of lava rock, which is home to more beneficial bacteria. The water overflows into the second drum, which is full of even more beneficial bacteria, including over 100 ceramic bioblocks. I also keep activated carbon in this section. Lastly, I grow plants in this section, and I'm currently growing wandering Jew, but this year I want to try growing some veggies. From here, the water is pumped back into the tanks with a Commando 3000, an adjustable pump rated up to 3,000 gallons per hour. I use the full strength of the pump to return water back into the tanks, and I use valves to control the flow so that more water goes to my 880 gallon. The amount of water being pushed into my 880 creates enough surface agitation on its own, but for my 350 gallon tank, I added a circulation pump to get more movement on the surface. Okay, so this is the actual audio. You listen to how these tanks sound in real person. When it comes to the noise output, this system is loud with draining noises and water flow sounds. I prefer silence, but realistically, with the amount of water being moved, it's not terrible. When it comes to functionality, the movement of the water creates a ton of oxygen within both of the tanks, and it houses a ton of beneficial bacteria. The only issue is with my 350 gallon tank, the water isn't always as clear as I would like, and that's because I'm using most of the pump's strength to push water into my 880 gallon tank. My 880 gallon is always crystal clear, but my 350 gallon aquarium, after feeding or if I move stuff around in a tank, it can take hours to clear up. This issue isn't affecting the health of the fish, so I haven't fixed it yet, but the solution would be to either get a bigger pump or just to separate the drums and have 2 separate sumps. It's not really a pressing matter, so I don't know when I'm going to work on it. Now those are my active filters. I do have a backup pump for my sump in case the one that I'm using fails. I also have an extra AquaClear 110, and I have enough sponge filters and air pumps to filter all my tanks if I ever needed to. I don't know if you noticed, but I try to include plants in all my aquariums because plants are natural filtration for your aquarium. Plants will help lower nitrates in your tank, and underwater plants will produce oxygen for the fish. With enough plants, you won't even need man-made filtration, and that's one of my goals, to have all my tanks become balanced ecosystems with fish and plants and just raw nature. Anyways, that's how I filter my aquariums. You can see that I have my favorite filters, but what's your preferred filtration method? What would you change with my filtration method? Thank you for taking the time to watch this video, and I'll catch you on the next one.